Hello and welcome back to the Patient First podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin, and I'm excited that you're here. And I'm really excited that we have a great guest today. Nancy K. Coy is co-CEO of Finance RX and a 25-year pioneer who's founded two patient lending companies. She teaches providers how to navigate the financial conversation by removing barriers, building trust, and raising case acceptance with ethical, compliant scripts. Author of the Finance RX series, she champions solve, don't sell, because when patients trust, trust converts. Nancy, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I've got to say, so off the top, you say solve, don't sell, and that when patients trust, trust converts. What we say at my companies with Tooth Apps and Cair, care more, make more, which is very much, we're coming at this trust, caring, case acceptance. This is such a major part of our industry right now. So can you talk a little bit about that perspective of how trust translates into case acceptance?
Absolutely. And it's a great question. I think it's a lot of times overlooked, or it's when we have with this fantastic patient that we're honored to take care of. I think we're great. We're doing really a lot better at getting patients in the door and on the marketing side. We're good at treating the patient like a guest. We're good at getting the patient into the chair, but we drop the ball and the momentum really stops when the money conversation starts. And as much as the patient trusts the provider, they need to trust the money conversation too. And that's why I'm such a big fan of solve, don't sell, because when we're solving, we're providing access and hope. We're not really selling, we don't have to sell anything. And when patients trust us and they trust the provider, and now they trust the person who's talking to them about the money conversation, trust converts. And it boils down to having that conversation with almost every single patient, because every single diagnosis is different. Every patient is obviously different, and every patient's financial situation is different.
I think you hit on one major topic that I think isn't discussed right now in dentistry enough that I want to unpack, and then I'm also going to challenge you on it a little bit. Uh, Number one, I've been talking to dentists for decades, and I agree wholeheartedly that people are doing much better getting patients in the door. In fact, so many dental practices we talk to say that new patients aren't a problem, right? Being busy isn't the problem. However, people are working harder, and there's a lot of practices that aren't even profitable
Right.
because they don't, right? And so case acceptance being busy is not the goal. Being, like
Being
elevating
profitable.
people's oral health, which is directly aligned with higher case acceptance and larger treatment plans that are more profitable. So I think that that's, couldn't agree more. The part where I'm going to challenge you is the word sell, because that comes up in dentistry, and it's like you could divide the audience 50-50 in dentistry. People that believe that that like treatment plan case acceptance is the same thing as selling, and other people that say no, it's totally different. I don't sell, I educate, right? I would lean more towards education is a form of sales. I feel like patients they basically have a limited discretionary expenditure, and it's our job as oral health professionals to help patients understand the value of oral health versus the value of the next iPhone or the next trip to Jamaica or whatever else that they might be spending their price on. And increasing the value, is that sales? Is it education? I think it's both. So I'll allow you to respond to that.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
it's funny because it comes up a lot because I do talk about solve, don't sell. And my position is that doctors are painkillers and they're solving a pain for a patient, and we don't negotiate with painkillers. If somebody's solving a pain for you, you walk into the hospital, and I'll speak from personal experience. I had meningitis years and years ago, and my head was hurting so bad that the last thing I was worried about was how much the bill was. It was just make me feel better, because I would have given my left arm. Well, I'm right-handed, so that wouldn't have. So I could have still ridden. But I guess my point is that it's just a different philosophy. And if you talk to the average person and you think in terms of somebody selling me something, it has a negative connotation. And there's an automatic resistance to that, because what we're trying to really build with our patients is a trust. And when patients, again, when patients trust converts, and we're trying to get this patient not only to trust us, Brian, but to come back, right? And when people start talking about the financial situation that they're in, that's some really personal information. And
Mhm.
that's why I'm a big fan of having the conversation instead of using the terminology, we're selling you something, because it just has a negative feeling about it. If you think, and I hate to kind of correlate even the auto industry, but we're in retail medicine to a large degree today. And what do most people think about when they go to a car dealership? Flag on the play. Somebody's just gonna be selling me, right? And it, again, it just has a negative connotation. And in healthcare, nobody wants to be sold. We're dealing with my body here, right? And
Yeah,
so that's really where it comes from.
I agree. And it's really, I agree with that as a negative connotation. My point is that like, I feel like exactly what you're saying. Building trust is really a matter of showing people that you care for them, right?
Absolutely.
And it's, however, I also feel that there's a lot of dentists, let's face it, there are dentists that might be looking at it like a sales like a car dealership. But there's also the dentists who are going, well, I think a lot of times dentists diagnose the patient's pocketbook, right? And I feel that you're doing your patients a disservice if you do that.
100%.
If you're allowing a patient to do things that's not in their own best interest because you're not imparting the value, right? To imparting the value to that patient, I think you're doing them a disservice, your team a disservice,
You're doing your branding
you
the
a
disservice.
disservice, your family a disservice, and so we're speaking the same language. And you told me about some statistics about patients that a, a big percentage of patients are putting off or not doing treatment because of finances, right? And so could you talk a little bit about that, about how patients are putting off treatment due to finances?
Yeah, absolutely. So the statistic is 53% of patients today have said that the reason that they declined the care, or they decided not to move forward with treatment protocol, was strictly due to affordability. It wasn't because they didn't trust the provider. It wasn't because they didn't want it. And I have felt for years, and seeing this over my career, that if a patient has taken time off of work, if they have scheduled an appointment to go to a dental practice and sit in a chair, not that they don't like their dentist, but there's a heck of a lot of other places I'd be rather spending my money. It's not that I don't want the treatment. It's that I don't know how to pay for it. And so the numbers absolutely support exactly what most patients feel like, and what's happening. So, yeah, it's imperative that we bridge that gap. And I've often said that patient lending, or the money conversation, is not only patient lending, but is the bridge to from diagnosis. Patient lending is the bridge to diagnosis and decision. And our patients really just need a care solution specialist that understand how to have that money conversation, which is nothing more than an extension of the provider, to be able to figure out a way for them to pay for the treatment. And I agree with you 100%. You have to diagnose what the patient needs.
Well, I don't know. So again, I'm gonna highlight something and then I'm gonna push you on something else that you said. So maybe I'm a little ornery today. Sorry.
You
But
can,
the you
right.
know, over a half of patients that don't go through with treatment is due to finances, right? So we're gonna have to unpack, because obviously you help address that situation, which is massive. I'm gonna say it again, because if you're busy and not profitable, this is probably the reason why, because half of the people are not saying it's the treatment because of finances. And guess what? Those are probably the cases that make you become profitable because because they need to, because patients are turning them down due to finances. The part I'm going to challenge you on is what else would you rather spend your money on than your oral health? I mean, I believe to my core that every dollar that I've taken from patients, it's the best dollar they could spend.
No,
So
and I
what
and
else would you rather spend your
hey,
money on,
well,
right?
and let's just assume that I can that my oral health was good, right? Obviously, there's a lot of items that you'd rather have in life, right? But I do think that you bring up actually a good point because in our world today, people are so much more focused on wellness. And I think more people are starting to understand that it really starts with oral health. And so people are taking more of an aggressive approach to, I need to fix this because this is my heart health. This is all kinds of, the domino effect. But yeah, I mean, if I could spend my money on going to a cool concert or going to buying a new cool car, I probably would opt for that. But I do agree with you that you have to take care of your health, or none of
If
these really
look,
matter.
everybody, well, most people have limited resources, and if the choice is between a concert and your oral health, I would say oral health. Now, obviously, I want the concert to be free. I'd like the card to be $1, right? But
But
with
no,
limited resource, that's all I'm pushing at because I believe. I mean, and the reason why I mention that is that I think that's part of the issue for dentists. Let's get over the fact that our restorations cost money, and just say. And I believe that part of the trust comes from the confidence in your procedures and
100%.
imparting that to patients. So that's the reason why I pushed on is that like if
No,
we
and
believe that boy they'd be better off buying a car than going through the service, then you're then start selling cars.
no,
That's what
but
right.
this you actually bring up another good point though, because patients are interesting. Working in all different verticals that I have in healthcare. And healthcare is definitely my specialty. I don't finance pools, and I'm not even a lender anymore, but that was never my
Mhm.
area. It's always been healthcare and dentistry. People tend to not fix the inside, Brian. They fix the outside. And a beautiful smile does have an aesthetic application to it, of course, right? But I do think people have to look at their oral health, and if they're sitting in that chair, they do care about that. And that's the real issue. The patient is there, they want the care, they trust the provider usually, and the recommendation. We just have to figure out how to, again, bridge that gap so they can pay for it because it is paramount. The cars, the concerts, none of that even matters if our health isn't intact.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I mean, so let's talk about that 53%. 53% of people that don't go through with treatment because of finances. Because I can tell you right now, the car industry has figured that out,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, zero money down, 6 months free, and then it's going to be a X amount per month they've figured that out. So how can we address that in dentistry so that we can get that 53% down to some,
Totally
I mean,
reasonable.
that's a ridiculous statistic, Frank.
It
So like,
is.
how do we address it?
Yeah, it's scary. It's quite frankly, it's very sad. So I
Mhm.
have said for years that lending has been an afterthought for years. It's never been a forefront. Businesses don't go out of business, they run out of money. And we have to look at the financial picture of the practice as a priority. And the way to do that is the money conversation has to be a strategy, and it needs to be designed per practice. What we've done in our industry for years is we enroll in a patient financing program or some type of lending solution. We think we have a financing program. No, we don't. We have a lending product. That's not a strategy. What happens in Walnut Creek, California is completely different than what happens in Burlington, Iowa, but yet we try to put everybody into a box. The money conversation is not one size fits all, and it needs to be defined per practice based on the demographics so that we can design the solutions that our patients need so that they can move forward with the treatment that the provider has prescribed.
Well, you know, at Tooth Apps, what we do with like a product Care, which is like my chart but supercharged, so patients can pay their bill, do online scheduling, get third party financing, all from a mobile application, right? And securely message your practice. One of the things we allow is that patients will be able to see their intro photos, right? Again, it goes to like showing trust, showing that you're caring for people, giving them their information. And we get pushback from, and practices can customize what patients see by default, right? So, for example, most practices don't necessarily want patients to see their progress notes by default, even though, because let's face it, a lot of us are not the best at writing our progress notes. But what's interesting to me is the amount of practices that don't want to share treatment plans with patients.
Yeah,
I'm
they're
like,
afraid.
how would you expect a patient to say yes to treatment if they don't know what the hell that treatment is? It makes no sense. And so, in a world where some dentists don't want to share treatment plans with patients, how the hell are we going to be doing financing? And how are I mean, I feel like these two are related. Financial
Yeah.
arrangements, right? Giving transparency, trust, in our case, sending it with the patient in an easy format. But like, I think that this whole system is broken in dentistry. And I think that like you are solving this core issue for practices. Is that
And that's my heart because I really do care about practitioners. I do care about these patients. It just makes me, it literally breaks my heart when I know these patients need this care so badly and they aren't accepting it. But this is what's happened. And excuse the terminology, but in our industry, we have a lot of head trash and we don't understand really interest. We don't understand interest rates. We don't understand finance. We don't understand credit. We don't understand the underbelly. So what happens is we don't understand something, we have a tendency to just refrain from having the dialogue. So there's two ways to either fix it. If the doctor doesn't want to have the treatment plan, financial, money conversation, then you need somebody in your practice that knows how to do that. And again, that's that care solution specialist who can have that dialogue on your behalf. Because I do understand that practitioners, it is an uncomfortable dialogue to because they fear. I think there's the fear that patients are they're taking advantage of somebody because most of us that got into healthcare because we care about people. So there is a weird kind of dichotomy when you're dealing with money and care. So how do you bridge that gap? Well, if you have a practitioner, a provider who is really comfortable with having that conversation, then they need to be educated about how to have that conversation with confidence for each individual patient. Again, if it's not an area of comfort, then we need to put somebody in the practice that knows how to have that conversation. And it's not smart to just expect everybody to be able to do this because it's a skill. You have to have the right person having that conversation. If you're asking somebody to have the finance conversation and they're not comfortable having dialogue like that, we're asking people to work outside of their giftings and we're not going to be successful. So my suggestion is I
doing that? Because I
encourage
know
providers.
at,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm glitched a little bit. So talk a little bit about how you're doing that with Finance RX. Like, how are you actually helping practices execute this type of how you're elevating the conversations when it comes to finances?
Well, it's education, it's teaching. So we actually have 6 different programs. So there's really a program for almost for everybody. We have a patient lending certificate program that teaches really the basics of what's a credit score, about TransUnion, FX, but the credit bureaus, the regulatory piece of the puzzle, how the lenders think, and the finance conversation. Again, I teach solve, don't sell, and trust. And then that is a program in itself. Each person can get a patient lending certificate. They sign an ethics pledge. They actually go through a basic criminal background check. It's very basic, but and then they have a sign on the door or a piece of paper on the back of it, and that's framed that says I have a patient lending certificate. But we also have 5 other programs, and it really depends on what that practice is doing. So I have a 4-week program that is really, again, pretty intensive. It's an 8-hour over a 4-week period of time program where we're teaching all those basic principles, again, to empower the industry to be able to have that appropriate conversation within regulatory compliance, et cetera, et cetera. But then I also have an additional couple of weeks if we're dealing with larger cases, then we probably need to extend our reach into our local community to embrace credit unions and local regional banks, because a local girl tends to make good. So you need to know how to negotiate with local banks and have a workflow to deal with that. Then I have a 2-hour workshop for providers to really understand why a lending strategy is imperative. That actually has some CE units with it as well. And we talk about EBITDA. We talk about why that money conversation is so important and really how to put together a strategy appropriately. So again, there's really programs for everybody.
Are the trainings virtual or in person?
I can do both. Most of
Okay.
them are virtual, but certainly the patient lending certificate program is 31 on-demand self-paced modules, and they're 5 to 20-minute modules a piece. But that way, somebody can go through that while they're doing their day job. What I have found though is I have obviously years and years of experience of doing this, and what I've learned is that if I do a live seminar kind of, sometimes it's a little overwhelming because it's so much information, versus if I teach them in segments and they can take a little segment, go back to, they're already in the practice, but implement what I'm talking about, get comfortable with that, and then we move to the next steps and it sort of builds on it. See a major shift in the case conversion.
I think it's the kind of thing that everybody would benefit from having their team members who are talking about money to go through the course, multiple courses. And so, I mean, I think it's, I think that it's you're sort of like what we call dog fooding, right? If what we're looking at doing is like educating patients to
Yeah,
say yes to treatment, we should need to educate our team members to educate patients on how to say yes to treatment first, right? That's exactly what you're doing. And probably, I think, one of the most underlooked places in the dental practice where education is necessary, which is talking about financing for patients. And that's why we're in this sort of like horrific state where 53% of patients that don't go through with treatment say it's because of finances. So thanks for what you're doing.
absolutely.
Where can people go to find more information
Yeah.
and get their team signed up?
Yeah, definitely Finance RX Venture Studio. That's FINRX studio.com. And just reach out and we'll meet with you and figure out exactly what programs you need to be in and help you really to figure out, do we need to design your strategy, help you to design the strategy and put together that, or is it just training your team? And there's a multitude of pieces of this puzzle. So yeah, Finance RX Venture Studio.
And we'll put a link in the show notes for this podcast too. Nancy, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.